Lena Stark stood at the edge of the rooftop, eyes scanning the distant horizon. Below, the city of New Atlanta sprawled, its skyline jagged with the scars of past wars. Bright neon lights flickered in the haze of smoke and dust, a testament to humanity's resilience. The air hummed with a low, unsettling frequency. Something was wrong. She could feel it. The world was too quiet for this time of night. A sharp chime broke the silence. Her wrist pad vibrated in sync with the encrypted message. She swiped it open, squinting at the message's coded text. The pattern was familiar, too familiar. "Lena," the message began, "they're coming. Federation fleet. Coordinate Dawnfire. They'll be here in 48 hours. She didn't need to decode the rest. The Federation was moving, directly toward Earth. Her heartbeat quickened. She knew this day would come. Earth, isolated and chaotic, was a planet feared across the galaxy, but it had always held a strange allure to the galactic powers. A volatile mix of technological prowess and unpredictable aggression. The Federation had long kept its distance, monitoring from the shadows, but now they were preparing to strike. She let out a long breath. No more running. She was done hiding. Lena Stark, once a soldier in the Earth Defense Corps, had walked away from the military after a betrayal. Now, she was something else, a mercenary, a bounty hunter. Yet, deep down, she had always known she would return to fight. Earth was her home. "Lena," the voice in her earpiece crackled, snapping her from her thoughts. "Get back here. We need to talk. Now." It was Rylan, an old contact from the days when Lena had worked for the Corps. He'd been quiet, too quiet lately, but she trusted him. She turned and sprinted for the nearest access point to the lower levels of the building. As she descended, her thoughts swirled. The Federation had never been this bold. Why now? Why Earth? And why such a rapid, decisive move? Lena arrived at her hideout, an old military bunker camouflaged beneath layers of rusted metal and concrete. Inside, Rylan was waiting, a mug of steaming synth coffee in hand. He looked up, his sharp features grim. "Have you seen the intel?" he asked, passing her a data slate. She took it without hesitation, her fingers scrolling through the files. Images of Federation warships filled the screen, along with battle strategies, all pointing to an invasion. "The Federation's calling it Operation Nullify," Lena muttered. "A full-scale extermination." Rylan nodded, his jaw tight. "We don't know all the details yet. But we know they're preparing to wipe us out. Earth isn't part of the Federation's plan for galactic stability. We're a problem. A big one." "Why now?" Lena asked, her voice colder than she felt. "Why the sudden push?" "They're scared," Rylan said, his eyes narrowing. "We've been making too many waves. They've watched us survive every challenge they've thrown at us. The War of Mars. The insurrection on Europa. The asteroid strike on Io. They know we're capable of taking down an empire, given the right motivation. Earth's unpredictability is a threat." Lena clenched her fists, the weight of the situation sinking in. The Federation had always been a shadowy entity, one that made decisions behind closed doors, never showing its true face. But this was personal. They weren't just sending ships to Earth to enforce order, they were erasing them from the galaxy. "How much time do we have?" she asked, locking eyes with Rylan. "Not much. Less than 2 days. But there's more." He hesitated, watching her carefully. "I've heard whispers, there's someone among us, someone close to the Resistance, who's been leaking information to the Federation. Someone high up." Lena's jaw tightened. A traitor. She should have expected it. There were always those who would sell out for power, for the right price. "I'm going after them," she said firmly. "If they want Earth to fall, they're going to have to go through me." "Be careful, Lena," Rylan warned. "We don't know who we're dealing with. The Federation's spies are everywhere. You won't just be fighting their fleet. You'll be fighting ghosts in the shadows." "I've fought ghosts before," Lena replied, her voice a low growl. "And I've won." The next few hours were a blur. Lena moved through the city, gathering a small team of trusted allies, a former mechanic named Joe, now a weapons specialist, Maya, a hacker with unparalleled skills, and Jack, a former soldier who'd been on the front lines of the Mars War. Together, they made their way to the old military vaults, where Lena knew she'd find the weapons they'd need for the coming fight. But as they approached the entrance, something felt off. The alley was too quiet. The usual hum of the city was gone, replaced by a strange silence, like the calm before a storm. Lena stopped in her tracks, her hand resting on the hilt of her plasma rifle. "Something's wrong," she muttered. Before anyone could respond, a sudden burst of gunfire shattered the stillness. The sound came from above. Lena dove for cover, instinct kicking in. Bullets rained down, and the team scattered into the shadows. "Ambush!" Jack shouted, ducking behind a nearby dumpster. Lena cursed under her breath. "Federation," she said, her voice steely. "They're onto us." "Do you think it's a coincidence?" Maya asked, pulling up a feed on her tablet. Her face went pale as she read the data. "We've been tracked. They knew we were coming here." Lena's mind raced. The traitor. Whoever had sold them out had done it with precision. This wasn't just an attack. It was a message. She gritted her teeth, standing tall. "We're not running," she said, her voice steady. "This is our planet. We'll fight for it, even if we're the last ones left." The team rallied behind her, weapons raised, ready for the oncoming assault. Lena's thoughts briefly flashed to the Federation commander who was orchestrating this. Zarek Tron, a name she'd heard only in whispers. If he thought he could crush Earth's resistance that easily, he had underestimated the one thing the Federation had never truly understood: humanity's unrelenting will to survive. And she would make sure that will burn brighter than ever before. Lena paced back and forth in the dimly lit command center, her eyes fixed on the holographic map projected in front of her. The map displayed Earth's most vulnerable spots, glowing red with Federation threats, cities, military bases, and power plants. The Federation's fleet was fast approaching, and with it, the undeniable truth: they were here to wipe Earth off the galactic map. "This is insane," Maya said, leaning over the console, her fingers flying across the screen. "The Federation doesn't just attack like this. There's more to this invasion than we're seeing." Lena didn't answer immediately. Her mind raced, piecing together the puzzle. The leak, the suddenness of the assault, it all pointed to one thing. The Federation wasn't just acting on a whim. Someone had been pulling strings, making sure their invasion would be swift and without warning. "You're right," Lena said finally, looking up at Maya. "But we don't have the luxury of time to figure out their bigger game. We need to act fast." She turned to Joe, who had been quietly assembling a weapons cache in the corner. His broad shoulders and steady hands made him a reliable ally. "Joe, get the tech up and running. We're going to need everything we can get. If we can't rely on Earth's defenses, we'll have to make our own." Joe grunted in acknowledgement. "You got it." Lena's eyes shifted to the door, where Jack stood, arms crossed, watching them all. The veteran soldier's presence was quiet but intense, the kind of person who spoke with actions, not words. He nodded, knowing the unspoken question Lena had asked him: was the team ready to face the impossible? "We'll fight them in the streets, we'll fight them in the air, wherever they come," Jack said, his voice low but determined. "But we need to hit them first. Hard." "Exactly," Lena said, walking toward the map and tapping a few buttons. The holographic grid shifted, highlighting key Federation supply lines and outposts scattered across Earth. "We're not just defending, we're taking the fight to them." The plan wasn't pretty. But then again, nothing about this fight would be. Lena stepped back, letting the map zoom in on a particular location, a Federation forward operating base situated on the outskirts of the Rockies. It was an advanced weapons station, one that had been rapidly constructed in the last 6 months, hidden under the guise of humanitarian relief efforts. It was one of the Federation's first major steps toward Earth's complete occupation. We hit this base, we disrupt their communications. If we can take it down before their fleet fully lands, we've got a shot at slowing them down. Maya's eyes narrowed, her fingers pausing over the console. You think we can pull it off? That base is heavily fortified. Federation tech is nothing like anything we've seen. I don't plan on fighting their tech head-on, Lena said, her voice colder than ice. We hit them fast and hard. We'll infiltrate, sabotage, and burn it all down before they even realize what's happening. Suicide mission, Joe muttered, but there was no hesitation in his voice. But hell, we've survived worse. Lena's lips curled into a thin smile. Exactly. Hours later, the team was on the move. The night was still, the wind carrying a bite of the coming winter as they made their way through the woods outside the base. The Federation had made the mistake of thinking Earth was a planet divided. But Lena knew better, humans were always at their most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. This is the spot, Maya whispered, her face illuminated only by the faint glow of her visor. She tapped a few buttons on her wrist pad. I'm hacking their perimeter sensors. We've got a small window before they notice the breach. Lena signaled for the team to move forward. They crept through the shadows, their steps careful but swift. The Federation's sensors were notoriously difficult to bypass, but Maya was one of the best hackers in the galaxy. Lena trusted her to get them through this first obstacle. The seconds ticked by like hours. Sweat beaded on Lena's forehead, but she didn't flinch. The team had done this before. Quiet, efficient, deadly. 5 seconds, Maya muttered under her breath, her fingers dancing over her wrist pad. Lena's breath slowed. Ready. And then, click. The hum of the base's security systems went silent. Maya looked up, giving Lena a brief nod. We're in. Move, Lena ordered. They dashed forward, crossing the perimeter in a flurry of movement. A few short minutes later, they were inside the base, cloaked in shadows, eyes scanning for any sign of Federation guards. Jack led the way, his weapon raised and ready. They moved like ghosts, slipping past security checkpoints, avoiding patrols, each of them slipping through narrow corridors with deadly precision. Lena had learned long ago that it wasn't the size of the army that mattered, it was the size of the will to survive. They reached the heart of the base, the communications room. As Lena approached, she could hear the faint sound of voices from the other side of the door. 2 Federation officers, chatting casually about their progress. Too close. Lena motioned for Jack to take the left side of the door. She tapped a few buttons on her wrist pad, a silent signal to Maya to prep the explosives. We'll take them out quickly, Lena whispered. Then, Maya, you fry their systems. Get the comms down. Maya didn't respond, but her focused eyes told Lena everything she needed to know. There was no room for error now. With a swift motion, Lena kicked the door open. The 2 Federation officers froze, startled by the sudden intrusion. Before they could react, Jack fired. One officer crumpled to the floor in a heap, the other barely managing to duck behind a console. Go! Lena shouted, rushing forward. The last officer barely had time to react before Maya's electrical pulse hit the console. Sparks flew, and the base's communications grid went dark. The Federation was blind. Lena breathed a small sigh of relief but didn't let her guard down. We've got what we need. Let's go. They turned, sprinting toward the exit. The base's alarms began to blare, a shrill wail echoing through the hallways. They had made it, but it was only the beginning. As they emerged from the base, Lena took a moment to look up at the dark sky, her pulse still racing. This was just the first strike. The Federation had underestimated Earth once again. And Lena Stark wasn't done yet. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but Lena could feel the weight of its coming. The skies above New Atlanta were clouded with the distant hum of Federation dropships, a deep, ominous sound that rumbled like thunder across the horizon. The Federation had finally arrived, and they weren't coming to negotiate, they were coming to end Earth. Lena stood in the heart of the city, her eyes scanning the skyline through the scope of her rifle. In the distance, she could see the massive formation of Federation warships descending slowly, their shapes blotting out the stars. It was a fleet unlike any Earth had ever faced, the largest ever assembled in human history. But Lena wasn't afraid. Her pulse thrummed with purpose. The team had split up after their successful sabotage of the Federation's communications base. Maya had infiltrated one of their supply lines, Jack and Joe were rallying the underground resistance, and Lena was preparing for the final push. Earth's survival depended on her next move. There was no turning back. "Lena, you there?" Ryland's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Intel says the Federation's deploying ground forces. They're landing in about an hour. We need you to make a move, now." Lena didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the warships above, each one a looming giant. She could feel the tension in the air, like the world was holding its breath. "I'm already in position," she finally replied, her voice low and steady. "Prepare the teams. We're hitting them where it hurts." An hour later, the streets of New Atlanta erupted into chaos. Lena and her team had set their sights on the heart of the Federation's landing zone, a sprawling complex now surrounded by heavily armored infantry, weapons stations, and force fields. They'd already lost contact with their allies inside the city, and now the resistance was on the brink of being overwhelmed. But Lena wasn't about to give up. The Federation thought they had Earth surrounded, that they could crush the resistance before it ever stood a chance. But Lena had other plans. "Ryland," she spoke into her communicator, eyes scanning the battlefield. "We need those EMPs online. Now." "We're almost there, Lena. Just hang tight." The noise of blaster fire and explosions in the distance was deafening. Soldiers ran through the streets, taking cover behind debris, firing at anything that moved. Lena's fingers tightened around her rifle. She knew that every second counted. The Federation might have better technology, better firepower, but they didn't have what Earth had. They didn't have the drive, the fury of people fighting to survive. "Team, get ready," Lena said, her voice sharp. "We'll hit them on 3. Joe was already crouched next to a barricade, eyes locked on the Federation soldiers in the distance. "You sure about this, Lena?" "We're outnumbered." "We're outgunned," she corrected, her gaze never wavering from the enemy lines. "But we're not outsmarted. Follow my lead." The team took their positions, the tension hanging thick in the air. It was the calm before the storm, each moment stretching longer than the last. Lena counted silently in her head, eyes narrowing as she tracked the movement of Federation forces. 1, 2, 3. The team surged forward, moving with lethal precision. Maya had already hacked into the Federation's communication grid, scrambling their coordination. Within seconds, chaos erupted within their ranks as orders became disjointed, confusion rippling through their lines. Lena's team moved like shadows, striking fast and hard. Joe's heavy rifle blasted through the first set of Federation soldiers, cutting down 2 with brutal efficiency. Jack was right behind him, his pistol raised, eliminating targets with precise headshots. Lena herself was in the thick of it, using the terrain to her advantage as she picked off enemy soldiers, her movements swift and calculated. "Clear the perimeter," she shouted. "We need those EMPs up, now." The ground trembled as the Federation's ground forces began to deploy their assault mechs, towering giants with laser cannons and armored plating. Lena's heart skipped a beat. They were bringing out the big guns. "EMPs online." Ryland's voice crackled in her ear. "Preparing to deploy. Stand by." Lena's eyes locked onto one of the massive mechs, which had just fired a volley of energy blasts toward her position. The shot missed by a hair, but the shockwave knocked her off balance. She gritted her teeth, eyes narrowing in fury. She wasn't going to let that happen again. "Joe, cover me!" Lena shouted, rolling to the side and sprinting toward the base of the mech. "On it!" Joe yelled, unleashing a barrage of gunfire at the mech's exposed joints, trying to weaken its structure. Lena reached the mech side, her hands moving with practiced precision as she deployed a magnetic charge to the machine's power core. She wasn't strong enough to destroy it outright, but she could disable it long enough for her team to make the kill. She slapped the device into place, then rolled away just as the mech turned, its weapons primed to fire. The EMP blast hit just as Lena dove behind cover. The shockwave was enough to send the mech into a violent shudder, its systems short-circuiting. It staggered, its movements jerky and uncontrollable, before collapsing to the ground in a heap of twisted metal. "Nice work," Jack said, a rare grin crossing his face. Lena didn't answer. There was no time for celebrating, not yet. They had bigger problems. "Federation reinforcements are on their way," Maya warned, her eyes flicking back and forth between her screen and the battle unfolding in front of them. "And they've got bombers coming in. We don't have much time." Lena's chest tightened. The Federation wouldn't stop. They had too much at stake, and Earth wasn't going to surrender. Not today. Not ever. "Then we fight," she said, her voice steady, unwavering. As the bombers roared above them, the ground shook beneath their feet. Lena could hear the whine of incoming rockets, the explosions getting closer. She turned toward her team, eyes fierce with resolve. "Fall back to the secondary position," she ordered. "We're not done yet." They retreated under heavy fire, weaving through alleys and abandoned buildings, using the city's old, broken infrastructure as their cover. Behind them, the Federation pressed forward, relentless and merciless. But Lena had one final card to play. Earth might be on the edge of destruction, but they had something the Federation could never understand. Humanity's ability to fight when everything was lost, to rise when it seemed hopeless. And Lena Stark wasn't about to let this be the end. The streets of New Atlanta were unrecognizable. Smoke billowed from every corner, the air thick with the acrid scent of burning debris. The city was under siege, and the Federation had unleashed everything they had. Their warships blotted out the sun, casting long shadows over the dying metropolis. But amidst the chaos, there was still a spark of defiance, an ember that refused to die. Lena stood on a rooftop, overlooking the devastation. Her face, streaked with dirt and blood, reflected the weight of the fight she'd led. The last few days had been a blur, strategic strikes, guerrilla warfare, and desperate attempts to hold back the inevitable. But Earth hadn't surrendered yet, and neither had she. "Lena, we've got one more chance," Ryland's voice came through her comms, tinged with urgency. "Federation's sending down their elite force, Zaraktron's personal troops. If we don't hit their command ship now, it's over." Lena looked up at the massive Federation command ship hovering above the city, its silhouette an iron giant against the smoldering sky. It was their last hope. If they could take down the command ship, they might throw the Federation into chaos, buy enough time for humanity to regroup. But Lena knew that the cost would be high. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and most of the resistance forces had already been wiped out. What was left of Earth's fighting spirit was concentrated in a small team of survivors, standing on the brink of extinction. "Tell the team to get ready," she replied, her voice hard. "We're going for the command ship." Lena and her team moved swiftly, cutting through the wreckage of the once thriving city. They were a small group now, Joe, Jack, Maya, and Rylan. The last remnants of Earth's resistance. The air was heavy with the sound of Federation firepower raining down on them, but they pushed on, fueled by a single belief: they weren't going to let Earth die without a fight. "I'm not sure how much longer we can hold the perimeter," Rylan said as they approached the Federation's landing zone. "Their reinforcements are pouring in from every direction." "Doesn't matter," Lena said, her eyes focused on the horizon. "We finish this now, or we don't finish it at all." They reached the Federation command ship's docking platform, a vast area surrounded by walls of energy shielding and patrolling mechs. The sky overhead rumbled as more Federation ships descended, but the resistance team didn't flinch. The time for hesitation had passed. "Jack, Joe, take out those mechs on the left flank. Maya, can you scramble their shields?" Maya's fingers danced over her wrist pad. "I'm already in." Their shields are down. Perfect, Lena said. We move in, now. The team attacked with precision. Joe's rifle cut down 2 mechs before they even had a chance to react, and Jack followed up with a series of explosive charges that took out the outer barriers. Lena and Maya advanced, using the cover of fire to breach the final entry point. But as they entered the docking bay, Lena felt a chill run down her spine. Zarak was waiting for them. The Federation commander stood at the center of the room, flanked by his elite guard. He was a towering figure, his face a mask of arrogance and disdain. His eyes locked onto Lena's, cold and calculating. I was wondering when you'd show up, Tron said, his voice smooth, like the hiss of a serpent. You've been a thorn in my side, Stark. But this ends today. Lena's grip tightened on her rifle. You've underestimated us from the start, Tron. Earth will never kneel to you. Zarak smiled, the expression chilling. Oh, but you will. I've seen your kind before, stubborn, prideful, but ultimately doomed. The Federation is inevitable. Your resistance, your fight, all of it will be crushed beneath our boot. Lena took a step forward, her voice steady. Maybe. But not today. With a swift movement, she raised her rifle and fired. The shot was precise, hitting Tron's personal guard. In the chaos that followed, Lena's team unleashed everything they had. The battle was fierce, blaster fire, explosions, and the sound of clashing metal filled the air. But Lena fought like she had nothing left to lose. She moved quickly, taking down the elite soldiers with ruthless efficiency, her every action driven by the memory of her fallen comrades, the people she had fought to protect. And then, it was just her and Zarak. He charged at her, his blade drawn, a blur of motion. Lena dodged, her training kicking in as she parried his strikes. The clash of their weapons echoed through the chamber. He was stronger, faster, but Lena had something he didn't, a will to survive. She fought with everything she had, and with a final, decisive strike, she pierced his side, her blade sinking deep into his armor. Tron staggered back, eyes wide in disbelief, and before he could recover, Lena thrust her rifle forward, pulling the trigger. His body dropped to the ground, lifeless. For a moment, everything was still. We did it, Joe said, panting, his face smeared with dirt and blood. No, Lena replied, lowering her rifle. We just bought Earth a little more time. The battle outside was far from over. The Federation fleet still loomed overhead, and their forces were regrouping. But Lena and her team had struck a decisive blow. The loss of their commander, the destruction of the command ship, these were critical blows that the Federation hadn't anticipated. As the team regrouped, they knew that the fight wasn't over. But for the first time in days, they allowed themselves a moment of relief. Earth wasn't done yet. The Federation might have had all the technology, all the firepower, but they had underestimated one thing, the sheer determination of humanity to survive. The last stand wasn't just about fighting for Earth. It was about proving that no matter how advanced an empire might be, there would always be something more dangerous than weapons, humanity's will to fight for its future. And that fight had only just begun.